we're lucky in Hertfordshire to have both BRE and the BBA based in this county. We've got Hertfordshire Building Control, we've got great links with both these organisations, and we're really grateful that BBA have agreed to join today's CPD webinar to talk about the new UKCA mark for construction products. Now, I know we've got a few building control colleagues from around the country in the audience. I haven't introduced myself yet for those, because we have got a lot of new people coming along. In all the fluster, I forgot to do that. I'm Trevor Clements. If you don't know me, I'm Head of Business Development with Hertfordshire Building Control. And my colleague Rachel, who you can see is our marketing executive, and she controls all the buttons. And if any of you start heckling, she will very promptly mute you. So it's not worth bothering. Anyway, so I was talking about today's webinar, and we will be focusing in on the building regulations and building control tie-in. You know, the Regulation 7 fitness of materials considerations. And to talk is, thank goodness, to talk and be heard today is Jason Harries, who is a business development manager with BBA. He's got 25 years of experience in the construction sector, working for product manufacturers on some of the largest projects in the UK. That included the Shard and the Olympic Village. He's also sat on government working groups for sustainability and the Green Deal, and personally chaired an industry-led initiative to reduce waste within the mineral wool ceiling tile sector. In recent years, he's also worked on the development of more eco-friendly construction materials and launched them onto international markets. So that sounds quite intriguing. It's a shame we don't have more time to find out more about that. He's got a strong passion for trying to encourage improvements within the construction sector, and he describes joining the BBA as a huge pleasure and the chance to help ensure that the UK construction market can meet the challenges of new products and techniques to be the safest and most sustainable in the built environment. So without further ado, let's ask him to take it away. If there's any questions, as usual, we've got another big audience here. So if you could use the chat function to pose those questions, and then any time left available at the end, and there's going to be less of that now, I'm afraid, we will cover them during the presentation at the end, and then anything that doesn't get answered, we will cover in a subsequent communication to you. Jason, if we can still hear you, take it away.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Sorry to keep everyone there. The joy of IT, meaning we can reach everyone, is also the bane of it. Can you see, is my screen sharing at the moment?
Not at the moment, Jason. Not quite.
No. Rachel, I don't know if you've disabled access on that.
Don't I try again?
That's better. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We're in.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Trevor. And as you say, we're here today to talk about UKCA and UKTA marking and what that means. Just first of all, if we can give just a little okay, first of all, just a short little disclaimer. The information that we're given is all done in good faith. These guidelines and some of the things we talk about can change at the government's whim. So the government information is always going to be the one to look at all time. Now, almost as if I had preempted us having a problem at the beginning of it, I have put together a 10-second summary of what we're going to talk about today. So effectively, we've had this little thing called Brexit that's come along, may have heard about it. We've now separated from Europe, and some of the things that we had that we shared with Europe, such as CE marking, has been replaced with our UKCA standards. So the short behind today is UKCA marks replace CE marks, and UKTA replaces ETA, and the logos change. So in a nutshell, that's the conversation for today. Now, for those that are still there and didn't give up after the short summary, let's look at a little bit of the timeline. Let's look a little bit at the history, because that explains a lot of what we're doing. So CE marking has actually been around quite a long time. It first was introduced in 1988 when the Construction Product Directive came out. However, at that time it wasn't mandatory, and it wasn't until 2013 the Construction Products Regulation replaced the Construction Product Directive, and at that point CE marking became compulsory. And we'll explain a little bit more detail in the coming slides. It's not compulsory for everything, but there are criteria under which it is. So it's been compulsory in the construction sector on certain products since 2013. We've all gone along quite happily for a few years. 2016, we've gone along, we've had a vote on whether we want to be in Europe or not, and we've decided against it. And that has triggered the next few years of talks and discussions, culminating in 2020 when the withdrawal agreement became effective. And at the end of that period, at the end of that year, the transition period finished, and the move towards being the UK and doing things separately began. From the 1st of January 2021, new products coming into the UK market were required to be UK CA marked or a UK TA, and we'll explain what those are shortly. But that was required as of January of this year for new products. However, with a lot of existing products on the market, the plan was always that existing products had 12 months grace until the end of December 2021. Well, there's been lots of challenges along the way in terms of converting products from European standards or from European systems such as CE to the UK, and you'll have probably seen in the news over the last few days issues around food and around the Northern Ireland border as well. Well, as a result of this, the deadline has been extended, so we maintain acceptance of the CE mark in the UK now until 31st of December 2022. So at the end of 2022, CE marking will no longer be recognised on construction products. Okay, but any new products coming onto the market should already be getting UK CA marked. So just to understand what these are, let's go through a little bit of the history and the roots to it. Now, the process for UK CA marking mirrors what we've always had in place for CE marking. So while I talk about the CE initially as the history here, what I'm talking about will be current and relevant for the UK CA as well. So as I've said, came into force in July 2013. And the reason it became mandatory was to promote consistent standards in the products on the EU market. Now, it was made mandatory for the uptake, and there was given two routes under which you could go. So some products don't comply and didn't at the time and still don't. You could go down the route of if your product fell under a harmonised European standard, or if your product fell under a European assessment document or an ETA. So let's just look at those two routes because these mirror what we're doing now. So if we look at the first route, harmonised European norms or harmonised standards, as we may know them, these are the EN 12345 numbers that give us specification standards. So if you produce a product that falls under one of those standards, then it is compulsory to CE mark, subsequently to UK CA mark, your product. And that could be the mark in the product, the packaging, and importantly, to provide essential characteristic data through a declaration of performance, which, as we'll talk about, will be the bit that will be most important for yourselves as building surveyors. The data that's declared when CE marking and the extent of the assessment that's needed by a third party, previously a notified body, now UK approved bodies, that's defined in the standard, and we'll refer a few times during this talk to Annex ZA of the harmonised standard. That determines what is required to be declared. Not all the same information is applicable between products. We'll look at that when we look at the labelling later. And that is absolutely true what we say there of UK CA marking, that if it falls under what is now termed a UK designated standard, then it is mandatory to be UK CA marked. So just briefly looking at the other routes. So we said there was 2 routes to marking. The second route is through a European assessment document. Now, if you have a product that you manufacture and you want to put it on the market and it doesn't fall under a European standard, then by the same token as if it does, you have to. If it doesn't, then you can't CE mark or UKCA mark. So there became a voluntary route, and that was through technical assessment bodies such as the BBA that would draw up a European assessment document. And that was effectively producing the background for the specification of the product, so starting to become what we would then term a European standard. The product itself was then assessed against that EAD and was issued with a European technical approval document. And the European technical approval document, this is going to go on and become the UK technical approval document for the UK, incorporates data including all the essential characteristics of the product. And again, this defines, as in with a harmonised standard, what third-party assistance is required. And I'll explain in a bit more detail what those levels of third-party assistance are. Now, as we said, this is a voluntary route. Now, once you've got an ETA in place, or now if you have a UKTA in place, CE marking or UKCA marking will be mandatory, but only once the ETA is in place. Now, we say that's a voluntary process. So why do manufacturers take the voluntary route? Well, very often it can be because they're being pressed by clients, by specifiers who want to see that it conforms, because looking at a CE mark or looking at a UKCA mark is a quick way of saying we know that it complies with a minimum set of requirements laid out by a standard. So as per the reason it was introduced, it's to give this standard level of acceptance of product quality through Europe, or for this case now the UK. And the UKCA works in the same way that you require a voluntary process to mark if it doesn't come under a harmonised standard. So those are the 2 historic routes, and those 2 routes are mirrored now in the routes that we take. So what really has changed? Well, a lot of it really is the wording. Now, I won't read all of these through to you. The copy of this will be available. But some of the key things are, in a lot of standards, you had something called a notified body. The UK equivalent is going to be a UK approved body. The European Technical Assessment, the ETA I just mentioned, is going to become a UKTA. You can see there's a theme. They put UK in front of a lot of these. Harmonised standards that we were talking about before, these are UK designated standards. The difference you may notice is you start to see BS in front of the EN and the number. But a lot of it is the change in the name. At the moment, the whole system behind UKCA and UKTA is intended to closely mirror the CE marking system, which has been in place for a number of years, as we've shown, and has worked. So we look at, is UKCA marking needed? So if you're a producer, the first question you might ask yourself is, do I have CE marking on my product already? If you do, then yes, you need UKCA marking. If you don't have it already, you ask yourself, is the product covered by a harmonised standard? And if the answer to that is yes, then you need UKCA marking. If it is, and you haven't already got CE, then you've been missing out on something for a little while, but that's a different story. And the other thing we would say sometimes to a manufacturer, if they're looking and thinking, do I need this, is sometimes it's as simple as check the competition. The manufacturer should often know if they fall under a harmonised standard, but sometimes it's the case, it may be an importer that's doing it for the first time and they're not entirely sure of what they're looking for, or sometimes it's because it doesn't fall under a standard, but they're looking to see if anyone else has one, or how other people are doing it. So it's as simple as that. A few simple questions: is it needed? And those are the reasons. So if we just quickly look at the background to the process, to break it down in its simplest terms, identify the applicable directive. So CE marking, you'll have different directives for electrical products, for engineering products, for toys, for clothes. We focus on the construction products, which was the construction product directive, now the construction product regulations. But There are different directives, so it's finding the one that's applicable. If you're bringing in electrical goods, it would be the electrical regulations. Secondly, identify the applicable requirements of the directive. So this will be looking at the standard, finding what standard would suit your product, finding those applicable parts of it for your product, and then identifying an appropriate route to conformity. Well, I'll explain in just a minute, but there's something called an AVCP level, which is laid out in the standard, and that will explain what route and what input is needed from a third party to assess your product. Then you go through the assessment of the product's conformity. That will be where somebody like the BBA conducts the activities. The manufacturer then compiles all their technical documentation, publishes it, and make the declaration and put the mark on their product. So it's a relatively simple process to doing it. So I just mentioned something called AVCP levels. So assessment and verification and constancy of performance. Well, what are they? There's something that a lot of people won't have heard of or very rarely come across. This is important to us within the standard because it lays out what type of activities are done by the manufacturer and what type of activities need to be done by a notified body or a UK approved body, and what the ongoing requirements are. So you'll see on there's 5 levels, and I'll talk through in a little bit more detail how they affect the actions that we carry out. But you can see sort of working down the list, if we have something like a System 1+, that tends to be determined by the application of the product and the nature of where it may be used. So in System 1+, you may have materials that are more critical to fire, maybe a fire-resistant insulation, for example. Down to System 4, which is a self-declared standard. As you can see, it's only the manufacturer's activity. And you might find things like floor tiles fall into that category. So there's a differing level of third-party assessment, and this is what makes the UK CA mark and the CE mark of value, because there's a degree of it has to be assessed, or certain criteria has to be assessed. So how does that come about, and what activities would a body like ours conduct here? So if we look at the higher systems, the 1+ and the 1, third-party verification involves inspection and assessment of things like factory production control, notified body reports, initial type testing reports. There will then be a body of ongoing surveillance. Every year these will go back and be checked. And the output of this is the client would need a certificate of constancy of performance. And this is the document that the BBA would issue as an approved body to say, we've verified all the documentation they've published, we've identified all their control processes within production, and we're satisfied that it meets all the requirement of the required standard for the areas that we're required to inspect. And then we would issue that certificate, and then the client can go ahead and issue their UKCA mark. The next level down is a level 2+, and this is where we would provide factory production control. And again, this is an ongoing visit. And a factory production control, well, again, it will look at the technical logs, it will look at the production logs, the way that they quality control in the factory. So we can be confident that the product they are making is made in the way that they've prescribed, the way that's been tested, that the materials are checked for the right level, etc. So the output of that is that, again, the BBA, or the UK approved body, then issues a certificate of conformity of factory production control, or very commonly just shortened to FPC. And again, that's the document that is updated and taken away and allows the product manufacturer to mark their product. These will come in, when we look at the marks, you'll see the relevance of these and these documents to those, and how they get reported on the declarations of performance. In third place, and this has been, or sorry, not in third place, but AVCP System 3, this is an area that's been quite controversial with the UK government at the moment, in that the Ministry for Housing, Community and Local Government is yet to make a decision on whether the UK will be allowed to accept EU test reports. Now, the process has always been expected that a UK body will be able to take an EU test report and, providing it's issued within a certain time period, be able to verify that it's been issued by an approved laboratory that's approved for the standard of tests that they've been asked to conduct. If we're satisfied with that, we would look to put an assessment of that test report to allow the client to move on. However, right across the industry, the UK has yet to agree on this, and vice versa, the European Union haven't agreed to accept UK test reports either. So that area has reached a little bit of a stalemate, which is one of the reasons why we've got this extended deadline for next year. So it allows this process to be sorted. The only other way of doing it for a product that falls under this level, and bear in mind the products can fall under various different levels depending on the product, is that you can have it all retested in the UK. Now, if you appreciate, there's a limited amount of test capacity, and tests for some products can be extensive. There are some within the water industry where the test alone can take 18 months. So obviously that wouldn't be practical to do in time. Now, you reach products under this attestation level 4, where there's no action taken by an approved body. It's something the manufacturer self-declares. And in self-declaring, they're saying that we've taken full responsibility for all factory production control, for all the relevant testing. When they put that out there, these are usually on products where they are perhaps less safety critical. So what a good example is very often in some of the flooring products, you may find this. So self-declared can also be sometimes with very small businesses. They are given permission on certain products that they can self-declare, as opposed to going down the route of maybe AVCP3. But this will vary. And again, that information is all found in the European standard to inform how that's done. So a UKTA, UK technical assessment, the ETA, as we mentioned, the first part of the process, the voluntary route, if you aren't under a harmonised standard, come December 2022, the ETA will not be recognised in the UK. Now, the ETA was a voluntary system, and the UKTA is. UKTA is not mandatory, even if the product has an ETA. So they might sell it abroad under an ETA. A manufacturer may choose to sell it in the UK without going through that process. However, without creating the UKTA, that manufacturer cannot UKCA mark. The flip side of that is, once you've created a UKTA, you're obliged then mandatory to UKCA mark. So it is a route that we're finding nearly all the manufacturers so far are taking up, because the UKCA mark is very highly sought after by a lot of the resellers, by the specifiers, insurance companies, warranty providers, because it gives that confidence in the product. Now, how does this process work? Well, the BBA is also a technical assessment body, and we operate through what we call converting the ETA to a UKTA. So it's not just as simple as retitling it or anything. We have to do a full assessment of all the European technical assessment against the European assessed documents. We make sure that it's still the product still complies, that the standards are all relevant, and that it meets all the requirements for it. We'll then do an assessment of existing test reports for those products and an assessment of factory production control and other measures. So before we issue it, we are certain that we're issuing the same product and that it fully complies with all the standards. So it's effectively rechecking everything that was ever produced under an ETA before we can issue a UKTA. So just quickly, how do we identify UKCA marking on products? Well, some products may be individually stamped with the UKCA mark. For example, larger products, plasterboard, timber panels, very often carry a big stamp on the back, which will have not just the logo of UKCA, but it will go into some of the details, which I'll talk about in a second. However, other products, smaller products, it may be impractical to mark them, or maybe impossible to mark them. So the packaging is marked instead. For example, things like screws and nails, some of the other smaller fixings as well. Now, the part that we would always urge with surveyors to pay a lot of attention to is the declaration of performance. Now, some manufacturers will include elements of the declaration of performance on their stamp on the product. Others, it will be on the website. Others, it may only be available on request. But this gives you the performance criteria of the product. So they're not necessarily all the same just because they've received a UKCA or a CE mark. It means that they've passed a certain level. Now, your level for what you require on a particular project may be different. So declaration of performance is the area that you're going to really want to look into and identify. That won't necessarily be shown on the product, but certainly the product will give you enough that should be able to identify who the manufacturer is, as well as probably what the product is. So as an example of understanding the labelling, what are you likely to see printed on it? Now, I'll explain how this can vary and look at 2 examples of this. The obvious thing you will see is the CE mark or the UKCA logo. Now, this is to be a minimum of 5mm in size. When it's that size, it's typically only displayed on its own. If anyone's been in a pub recently, you may see it on a beer glass. You'll have just a little UKCA logo stamped. But with construction products and larger products, it will very often be accompanied with more detail. So in this example, looking a little bit further down, we've got an identifying number. This 4-digit number is the identifying number for the European notified body or the UK approved body. So in the UK, that might be 8036, which is the BBA's reference number. These numbers can be checked on, for the EU, it can be checked on Nando, which is not a chicken restaurant, but is actually an organisation which records all of the notified bodies throughout Europe. So that will be displayed. You will then find identifying mark of the manufacturer. This may or may not include the address as well. It could be the name, it could be their brand stamp that's used here. And we talked earlier, or I mentioned earlier, about the relevance of the declaration of performance and where this comes together. So sometimes this will be disclosed on it as well. And that will tell you which paper document needs to apply to this. And if you gather a copy of that document from the manufacturer, that will then give you the full details on the product. It will tell you who's assessed it. So again, that would be like which approved body has done third-party notification on it. It will tell you on things like manufacturer. It will tell you the performance criteria of the product and go into much more detail. So that's the bit that's particularly relevant. And if in doubt, when you're trying to tie them up, it should be whatever is on the stamp will relate to the document that the manufacturer will be able to provide you. Coming into the next box, these UKCA or CE stamp will always contain the number of the harmonised standard or UK designated standard that is applicable to that product. In this case, it's 13986, which will be to do with wood panelling that's stamped on it. And traditionally, this is the year, so you can see, you know, in case it's against a standard that's been superseded. Details of the standards, if you want to find them, the main starting place with that would be somewhere like BSI Online, where all the copies are held. And then further details they might put is an identifying mark, which gives an indication as to the product or its use. In this case, it's P5, so we know it's P5 board, you know, as a general mark. So again, when you're checking any details, you can see that you're looking for the right thing. It may also be that if you've got specifications on site and it's telling you it must be this board, if anyone was to see that that was the wrong board on there, it's just a quick way of identifying that the wrong product has been used. And then basic and short, basic performance characteristics may be included on here as well. It may not include all of them. You'd need again to refer to this document, the declaration of performance, to give you the full details on that. So look at the detail that's on that label, and then if we compare that to this, for example, is a label that would go on typically a pack of screws or a pack of nails. Again, we will always see the logo on the top. We've got the mark of the manufacturer, the ID of the manufacturer, the name or brand name on there. And they may include, in this case, they haven't put the approved body's number, which would go under the CE mark. they've put the year in which the marking was applied. So sometimes you may find a number on here, and it will relate to the last 2 digits of the year it was applied. And I'll explain in a minute why you see differences in these. Again, not much of a change there. Number and year of corresponding standard in there, but where they've explained some of the essential characteristics on this, they've been required to give more product description and even to an identity of the parent material. This may be particularly relevant if it's being used on site and you're worried about metals clashing with other metals, or if there's a particular specification about what they should be made of. It's just an easy way of identifying that the right things should be used. So I said I'd talk about the variation in labelling. So why have we got 2 labels that look slightly different? Well, again, this is all that's laid down in the harmonised standard. There's a section at the back, section called ZA. This is where I said it lays out what the AVCP level of the product is. It will also tell a manufacturer how they should mark the product, what should be included, where it should be displayed. So that information is given in the standards for it. So this is something that a manufacturer would be reading and interpreting. So you will see it's not one stamp is the same for everything. They will be required for different information. You could sometimes find as well that we have products of the same standard and the marks may be slightly different. And again, that might depend on the AVCP level, and where that may change is you may have, for example, a board, and if the board was to be used internally, it might be required to have an AVCP level of 2, but if it was being used externally, it might only be required to have a level of 3, because it's deemed that the application or the risk involved with the product would be different. So you may even find that you get different stamps or different systems within the same standard. So you will see variation in the labels that appear. So as a quick checklist with some of those things, where can you check if they're genuine? Where can you check the details? Well, I would largely trust that in this day and age, the manufacturers disclose everything to the best of their knowledge and very, very accurately. But sometimes people do want to just check if it's current or if there's any question marks over it. If you're looking at an ETA for a CE mark, and the reason I talk about this still is because until the end of next year, they will still be applicable to the UK market. So there's a database held by an organisation called IOTA, and the website address is there, iota.eu, and the ETAs will be listed there, so you can check, okay, who's it for, is it current, or whatever there. And for the UK TAs, obviously this is quite a new thing to the UK. We haven't got an agreed database for these yet. There is talks that there will be one, but in the meantime, the BBA are the only people that are issuing the UK TAs at the moment, and we are going to be hosting those on the website. So when they're published, they'll be on the BBA Certs website. If other people get involved with it, then we'd have to see how those are going to be displayed. Now, the one thing that surprises a lot of people, there is no standard register of CE marks or UK CA marks. There's an awful lot of CE marks and UK CA marks out there. And I guess it's always been a case of who would be the Secretariat, who would take up the cost of publishing and all of those. But to date, there is no standard register for those. It would be down to, manufacturers would have the information on their website, but there isn't a standard list that you would be able to check on that. So let's just look at a very, very quick checklist. What you do to find out if a product isn't UKCA marked or CE marked, and you've got question marks, is it the right product? Should the product be used? The first question is, does it fall under a UK designated standard? And I mean, again, a quick look around, a quick sort of Google of designated standard for fibre cement boards would tell you what that would be. Does it fall under a UK designated standard? Well, if it does, then it should be UKCA marked. Now, if it doesn't, then secondary question, does it have a UK TA? CE case, does it have an ETA? And if it doesn't, then no, no CE marking is required. I said at the beginning, not applicable to every product. Some products fall outside of all of those, and unless the manufacturer's chosen to go and have an ETA or a UK TA, then it doesn't require marking. And that can very often be a commercial decision for that manufacturer. Does the cost of the certification offset what the value is in them selling it? Some products it will, particularly when you're in things that are more safety critical. And I find things like the fixings industry, for example, are very, very big into all of this. They will voluntarily go and take the ETA or the UKTA. So those are the questions to ask. And then if it does have the UKTA, then of course it should be UKCA marked. So little checklist that you'd ask yourself if you come across a product that's not CE marked or UKCA marked, and I'm wondering if it should be. Now, as we said, CE marks will be discontinued or will no longer be accepted for use after January 2023. Now, that's not to say that you won't find them on the market. If people are looking at a product and saying, well, this has got CE marking on it, surely it should be UKCA marked by now if we're getting into maybe even 2024. There can be a reason for that. The definition is that the products must be placed on the UK market by the 31st of December. So if you're a manufacturer or importer, whoever's responsible for placing it on the UK market, if you've sold the product, so you've sold it into wholesale, distribution, retail, or you've sold it onto an end user, it's in the market, it's on the market, it's deemed on the market. So, you know, they may be selling it on a little bit further down the line. This is obviously just to sort of allow for, you know, stock not going to waste and products that are on the market, but you may find things for a little while longer still filtering through with the CE marking on, and that's why it would indicate that they've been on the market for longer. It's always fair to ask the question, but that's the that's why you may find them for a little bit longer. So the question, do we need CE marking, UKCA marking? Why? Well, as we said, because there's a lot of third-party verification checking as well, it does demonstrate the manufacturers check the products so they meet the safety, the health and or environmental requirements as laid out in the standard, which is set to EU or now UK levels. They've satisfied the legislative requirements of the market that it's going to be sold on. These don't indicate where the product was manufactured. You could have a product that's manufactured in Asia, you could have a product that's manufactured in South America. This relates to the market on where it's being sold, not where it's produced. On the market it's being sold. So it does give us that confidence that very often they've been approved by a third party, but at the very least the manufacturers had to go through a number of checks and produce a number of checks and produce a technical document which says that these are safe for the environment and the market that they're going on. So does that mean they meet building regs? This is a question that comes up. In and on its own, just because it's got a UKCA or a UK or a CE mark does not on its own mean that it's going to meet building regulations. Really, for checking this is why I talk several times about the declaration of performance. This is going to show you the performance criteria of the product. So the specifier, the constructor, the surveyor is going to be able to tell from that for definite if it achieves building regs. That's where the key data is. You know, if you need something that has, you know, a certain fire rating, the requirement of the standard may not mean that it has to be to that level. So the declaration of performance is going to be the bit that's key when you're checking if it complies fully with building regs. So a question we get asked a lot at the moment, presumably a lot of people here will know about the BBA Agrimont certificate. It's what we tend to be best known for, and what that is. And if UKCA marking is compulsory for applicable products, you know, where does BBA Agrimont certificate fit? That's a voluntary approval. Well, you do need, if you've got a BBA Agrimont certificate, you would still need a UKCA mark because that is a compulsory thing to have. What the difference is that the Agrimont certificate goes far beyond what the requirements are for UKCA marking. So it goes into greater depth. There's more validation about the what we call fit for use. So it's looking at product performance, longevity, durability, etc., more in terms of installation, handling, and everything as well. So they are two different things. So UKCA is compulsory if you've got a harmonised standard or a UKTA. An Agrimont certificate is a voluntary, but the information there goes far deeper and generally gives far more confidence in the exact performance of a product. So to cover in a little bit more detail before we wrap up, the Agromont certificate, what does that cover? So the information about the application or applications and the appropriate usage of the product. It will go into more detail around short and long-term performance of a product or the system that it covers. It will give information on the way that the product should be stored, handled, installation, future maintenance, etc. Where and how a product complies with building regs where it's relevant. So as we said, you could look at a BBA certificate and take the confidence that this is going to approve with the building regs at a glance. With the UK CA marks, there's still that need that we would say, to be on the safe side, compare against a declaration of performance. And a BBA in some situations, the information can go through to installers and even ISO accreditation, which would be available with certificates. And we're looking at installer schemes and so on as well. So that with the Agromont certificate effectively goes a stage further than we've got with the UK CA. So that's the end of it for myself in terms of talking. I think we've managed to keep it almost back on time. I hope that's given a bit of an insight into where we've come from with CE marking and where we've gone to with UK CA marking and how that may be applicable for yourselves. If there's any questions, Trevor, if you've got any questions, I'm happy to field those now.
Yeah, Jason, well, an observation and a question. Thank you very much, by the way, for that very interesting presentation. Jane observed that on the label for the UKCA mark, the date format was rather American looking, which is, yeah, did seem ironic, but I guess that's deliberate, but I don't know.
I don't know is the honest answer to that, whether it came in. I guess there was probably an influence in there. I thought somebody was going to pick up the fact that I'd put put UKCA on one and hadn't put BS in front of the EN standard, which was the one observation I was expecting, but I hadn't checked the date. But yes, it is. It possibly does relate back to something we've picked up from over the pond.
Yeah. Oh dear. Poor show, I would say, but there you go. And says, can we, I think you might have covered this, can we accept BBA Agromont certificate without a UKCA?
The answer to that, yeah. So the answer to that is yes. You will find a number of products out there which don't fall under the harmonised standard or haven't gone down the UKTA route, so cannot be UKCA marked, in which case BBA is seen as being that mark of approval, that mark of reassurance for it. That's absolutely fine. Do just look at the question or ask the question, and you will find also in the BBA Agromont certificate, it will say if it complies to a harmonised standard. You know, if it should have one, it should have one. There's no getting away from that. Yeah, you will find a number where they don't fall under any other system. So BBA is their real proof to the market.
Thanks for that. I had a question actually, because you seem to say that you mentioned this organisation, was it Nando's or something, as giving a central registration for UKCA marks, and yet I think later on you said there is no registration of them. So from a building control surveyor's point of view, as we know, it's only a starting point to assessing compliance of a product, but you know, what's to stop us being hoodwinked by a fake mark or a fake declaration of performance? How would we check to make sure that it's valid?
Okay, so first part of that question, the Nando database is a database of the approved bodies. All right. So that's not yeah, that's not a list of those marks. No, unfortunately, there is no central log of UKCA or CE marks. There is for an ETA or for the UKTA, you will be able to see where those are. The only way really is it would be a degree of doing due diligence to sort of go back through the product. As we said, on the label or on the declaration of performance, it will tell you who the third party body is that has assessed that product. So if you look at a declaration of performance, typically about the fifth item on there would say has been assessed by, it may just say approved body 8036, which you can go to, and in this case it would be for a UK one, the UK Market Conformity Assessment Bodies, and see whose body is 8036, which is the BBA, and you could check back to see, you know, have they there. There disclose confidential information, but you can find out, has that product been assessed? Because if we've issued a factory production control, very often they will reference that number when they give it to you. So the only real way to check back in that case would be, if you were in great doubt, would be to go back, who is the assessment body, and that will be shown on the mark or on the declaration of performance. Now, if somebody's put a false one on there, then straight away that flag gives a red flag, and you'd be talking to something like Trading Standards to investigate further.
Thanks. Yeah, so it takes a bit of digging and a bit of work to do there, but no means straightforward. There you go. That's how it is. Maybe it will change. Simon Hayward is asking, are there plans to use barcoding or RFIDs on materials to help with confirming provenance?
There is talk around this, around various things. Some of this relates back probably to things like golden thread as well, and fully being able to go into a room and identify all the products. Talks are, or that is in consideration in talks, but there's nothing imminent around that at the moment. But I know these things are in thought and are in consideration based on the back of golden thread.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, the Building Safety Bill, we now have it. We have the bones of the new legislation. Part of that will be regulation of the construction materials industry and products, and but we're yet to see the secondary legislation as to how that will go. But that would be a sensible thing to include, wouldn't it? As you say, with the golden thread being one of the key recommendations out of the Hackett report, that would be quite a basic measure to put in place. So we'll see what happens there. Right. Well, I don't think there's any more questions that I can see. Rachel, have I missed any questions there, or are we all covered?
No, that's all covered. Thank you.
Well, in that case, I will thank Jason again for that really interesting talk. It really clarified it in my eyes, and really useful to myself, and I hope all our build control colleagues and all our other customers and colleagues out there from other professions. What is coming up next? I think on the stocks we're going to do a presentation on the new approved documents that are coming out that are backing up the Future Homes Standard. So we'll be doing that in a month or two. So watch this space for news of that one. That will obviously back to grassroots of building regulations and the legislation. But apart from that, we'll keep looking for interesting topics to use. And if you have any suggestions in that respect, the way you'd like to get CPD training from us, then we're always open to those. We'll see what we can put together. So apologies for those early technical issues. Rachel no doubt used her skills to edit all those out and edit out my red face and me talking when I was on mute. Nobody will ever know that who watches the recording, hopefully. But I hope you enjoyed it despite all that. And I hope we see you again, especially the new people who came along. We don't always have issues like that, I promise you. And hope you'll join us again.